Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of It's Messy, but It's So Good. And today I have a returning champion guest, Kristofer Rios. Kristofer is a journalist and documentary filmmaker from New York City. Most recently, he produced Karol G, Tomorrow Was Beautiful for Netflix, and we're going to talk about that today. He also co-directed and co-executive produced Menudo, Forever Young for HBOMax, and that's a 4-part investigative series about the Puerto Rican boy band Menudo. Kristofer's an Emmy Award-winning producer, and his work has been recognized by Sundance, the GLAAD Media Awards, and the Edward R. Murrow Awards. Enjoy the show. Hi everyone, welcome to It's Messy, but It's So Good. And today I have a returning champion, Kristofer Rios. Kristofer was I believe my first or second podcast. So it's like almost 2 years later in September, and he's back with another project that he's going to talk about today. The documentary that came out on Netflix, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago.
On May 8th, yeah.
Yeah. So welcome, Kristofer.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. I didn't realize I was your second guest, so
Yes.
I'm an alumni of the show.
Yes. Yeah, I heard it. I heard another podcaster say when he has people come back on, returning champion, and I said I like that. I'm going to use it.
Love that.
Anyway, I would love to hear about the film, the documentary Karol G, Tomorrow Was Beautiful. I'd love to know what is this documentary about, number one?
Yeah, so I guess for some of your listeners who might not be familiar with Karol G, she is, I would say, one of the most famous and most influential Colombian women pop stars. Pop star is a little bit of a misnomer. The genre that she's sort of made her name in is reggaeton. So reggaeton is the kind of music from the island I'm from, Puerto Rico. And it kind of came out of the caseríos in the 90s. And sorry, actually earlier than that, it's like late 80s, early 90s, and has kind of since exploded into the world and has become a global music force. So your listeners might be most familiar with someone like Bad Bunny or Daddy Yankee. These are like, some of the most well-known reggaeton artists, and Karol is sort of a new generation of reggaeton singers that has come out of Colombia. So the music has grown. It's taken root in many different countries in Latin America and in diaspora. And there's like a generation of singers that have come out of Medellin, Colombia, and she's one of the most well-known and most famous. And so the documentary is about her, but really it looks at her life, looks at everything she's kind of had to go through as a woman in the genre. You know, I think for women in any industry, but especially in film and music, making a career and making it on your own terms is really difficult. And there's no exception to it really anywhere. Maybe even harder for someone like Karol, who came from, a country where, the industry is exploitative. But in addition, there's a lot of sort of like deep-seated and deep-rooted, misogyny, right? And
Yeah.
so the film tracks that a little bit, just sort of all that she had to go through to kind of get to where she's at now. But what we capture is a real special moment in her career where she, super well known in Latin America, super well known in the diaspora and Spanish speaking communities. But her last album was probably the first one that really kind of, as you say, quote unquote, like crossed over, meaning there was just more mass appeal. It wasn't just Spanish speaking audiences that were, paying attention and listening. She really kind of cut across into English speaking and other speaking audiences because she's pretty big in Europe. And so we had the privilege of joining her on her tour for her last album, which is I mean, there's so many records that it broke. But I think the one that's like which you see in the documentary, the one that's the most important is that it's the first she is the first woman to have a all Spanish language album chart on the Billboard Top 200. And I would have to fact check that. It might be the top 100. I can't remember, but it's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
um, and so off the success of that album, she starts a tour, and we went along for the ride with her. So we went on tour with her. We thought we would just hang out with her for the US part of it, and we just kept going all the way and to Latin America, and we kept going with her all the way to Europe, where she finished the tour.
So how many performances did she actually do? Do you
Oh
know?
man. I can look it up
Oh,
off the
that's
top of
okay.
my
Just yeah, off the top
yeah.
of your head.
I want to say so. I know that it was over a dozen in the U.S., which is a big deal. If I may, I'll just sort of take a moment and like this is also in the film, but Carol is the first uh, woman Spanish speaking artist, right? Woman Spanish speaking artist, so Latina basically, to do a stadium tour of that scope and scale.
Mhm.
Um, Selena Quintanilla, who maybe some of your listeners know, she started to do a tour before she was murdered.
Yeah.
And she never got to finish her tour. So Carol is the first, basically the first to pioneer, the first Latina to pioneer a tour, stadium tour, which is just for some scale. I think like whatever the last concert was that you went to, right? Maybe it was an arena. So arenas are like Madison Square Garden, Fenway. I think Yankee Stadium is considered an arena. We're talking football stadiums, right? So we're talking stadiums that have capacities of 90,000 people. At the highest end, and at the lowest end, we're talking like 50,000 people, 60,000 people. But that's a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Um, Carol sold out every show in the US. And that's a huge deal. I think it says a lot about, her music. It says a lot about who she is, says a lot about, where she's from, the people who listen to her music, the people that support her. These are Spanish speaking, communities. These are people in the diaspora. We're talking about communities that normally are sort of invisible or marginal at best, right? In the conversation in media. And now, many of these people are targets of just sort of, the administration, right? So it was a big deal for her to sort of bring those folks out and fill stadiums with this is my community, right? Because I think that like the wisdom or the convention in the industry is that it can't be done, right? That like if you're an artist who speaks Spanish, if you're an artist that kind of makes music in a certain genre, stadium tours are to fill a stadium is a really hard thing to do, and she did it time and time again throughout the U.S., throughout Latin America, and throughout Europe. And that's impressive. And so we were able to capture just sort of how special that moment was for her and her team, and other artists in the industry, people from, communities that that she comes from. It's a big deal for all of us that she was able to do that.
Yeah, which was really my next question, which you kind of answered, which is what really drew you personally to this story? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the last time we talked, I mentioned that I worked on a project called Science Fair, the series, which was it was a longer, not a longer, I guess it was like a second part to another film that I made called Science Fair. The director of that, of both of those documentaries, is a longtime collaborator of mine. Her name is Christina Costantini. She's a dear friend, and we actually started as reporters at Univision, working on immigration stories, investigative stories. We were journalists together, and that's sort of how we became really close friends, and just we have just been working with each other ever since. And so Christina, she she and I would say there's sort of a community of like Latino, Latina, Latinx, if you will, filmmakers that, we all are really close collaborators. We support each other because there aren't many of us, right? And not only are there not many of us, but there aren't many of us who have, who get opportunities to tell stories at sort of this scale. And that's not because there aren't great stories, or it's not because we don't try. It's that the same kinds of forces that Carol is facing in her industry, I think we face in our industry, as documentary filmmakers, that there are conventions that say certain kinds of films, if you have subtitles, things like that, right? That they won't do as well. Um, and I think that like what Christina has tried to do as a director and what I've tried to do as a producer, and many of us in sort of larger, Latinx filmmaker community, is to kind of disprove that convention. And so, they Christina was the one who sort of got the opportunity. This Machine, which is the production company that we work with, they reached out to her and to see if she would be interested. And then, sort of Christina did her research and was interested. And she asked me if I would come along for the ride. And I had familiarity with Carol and her music. I'm a fan of reggaeton. I remember when growing up in Puerto Rico, when it was hitting, the airwaves, um, and was becoming sort of like a force. It was for me like a really fresh kind of music, and it reminded me a lot of like sort of the hip hop out of New York in the '80s, and salsa out of New York in the '70s, right, '60s and '70s. Just sort of like really trying to express something and say something that people hadn't heard. And so, been listening to reggaeton for a very long time. And to me, when I heard Carol, I felt similar, that it was sort of a new, like what she was doing was new and different. I mean, maybe the rhythms and the beats, were familiar, but what she was trying to say with her, with her music felt like an innovation, and felt like she was pushing into, a space that we hadn't seen really before, in the genre. Not to say that there weren't other women artists in the genre. There were, but there weren't many, and certainly not many as successful as her. And she just sort of, was able to kind of find a voice and find a sound that to me felt fresh, and felt that it was sort of capturing something in this moment, at least in the growth of the music, right? So when Christina asked me to join, I knew who Carol was, and I was interested in her music. I didn't necessarily know her story as well as I know it now, but it seemed like a really great opportunity to, kind of be a part of a project that was going to, it sort of bring, this person, Carol, to the world in a way that like they maybe didn't expect or hadn't seen before. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, and I think I talked a little bit about this last time, for me, those kinds of things are really important in my sort of career, or me finding my way through this, this business, is that um, I really am interested and really want to, try to find ways to amplify these narratives, right? To sort of take these stories that wouldn't normally be given the chance, right? And bring them into the conversation, and bring them into the conversation in big or unexpected, or fresh ways. And so, yeah, I mean, it just kind of checked a lot of the boxes for me, like I knew her music, loved her music. I mean, I'm not Colombian, but culturally, like I think she's pulling from the same space that I'm pulling, and I'm being inspired from. And it was cool. It was like I'd never done a documentary about a pop star, and I've never gone on tour, you know. So there was a bit of a challenge there too, right? That was like exciting for me, So like I told Christina, yeah, and when she had reached out to me, it was still just an idea. and the way things go in this industry, we didn't know how far we'd get. But I mean, I trust her vision, her meaning Christina. And I knew that like if we worked together, we would figure it out. And so, here we are.
Yeah, yeah. I love the film. I thought it was well, we know that anyone that's successful has an incredible commitment to the work that they're doing. But what I loved about the film was that it was so real and raw in a sense, because she showed herself fully emotionally in the film, and it captured, I think, the reality of what
Mm,
because when you look at the creative, you look at them and oh, they're successful, but people don't understand the because it's not exposed usually the realities of the ups and downs of what people go through, the doubts and the highs, the lows, and the amount of I think passion, which this podcast is all about, it
mm,
is that it takes. And the to me it was like looking at the creative process from the beginning, um, through very honest, raw, and you know real, terms, her really exposing herself emotionally. And I love that because it's the reality of what we all go through as human beings as we're going through our passion and we're growing. So, and I also, I love the music because I know a little bit about reggaeton, but I really never, you know, listened to it that much. And I really enjoyed the concert experience, and how much she really wanted to get it exactly the way she wanted it, I,
yeah.
which is true for many artists. But I mean, you could see that she was involved in every single aspect, and I love that too. She just didn't say, "Okay, you guys take care of that." No, I like this, I don't like this, and it was really a great film. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it took a huge team. I mean, I played a small I would say a small part in like just getting it all together. I mean, you know, there's some documentaries where it is just sort of like a person in the camera. This was not that. This was like
Yeah.
we had it was a small like field team, but I think a mighty field team. I would be remiss if I didn't shout out our cinematographers, Louisa Conlon, who really like that intimacy and that closeness to Carol. If it is communicated, it has a lot to do with her, not just her filmmaking skills, but I mean, she's a dear friend, and someone who I think is just like she has that rare talent where, she has a lot of empathy, and she has a way of really like connecting with people, and then she's able to kind of convey that and communicate that with her lens. And yeah, I mean, a lot of those beautiful moments and those beautiful scenes, it's just Louisa and Carol, or Louisa and Carol and her team. But that being able to be in that situation means that you really need a lot of trust, and Luisa was able to get that. And then similarly, Meki Creos, who's he actually he's like a brother to me. He worked with me on the Menudo documentary for HBO Max, and we have been collaborating ever since. And he's just also someone who just has a way about him that is very disarming and charming, and he gains the trust, rightfully deserved, because he's a great person, but just a really, just a real gentle soul. And he was the other cinematographer on the project, and so I think we were really lucky to have them on the team, because most of the time my job was to just set things up and then disappear. Like if Carol ran into me, I did something wrong, right? Like I needed to sort of you wanted sort of like things to feel natural, and we didn't really want production, our production to be a big thing, because then you know everyone around Carol and Carol would sort of be aware, self-aware, and it would sort of break that intimacy that Carol wanted. That's actually, I mean, we wanted that, but we were aligned in that. Like she really wanted things to feel natural, and she wanted, her fans and her audience, to see her sort of at her truest, right? And
Yeah.
so in order to do that, yeah, we needed those two really talented cinematographers. Um, to do, I mean, a lot of the work that like they wouldn't normally do. Like they wouldn't normally run sound. They wouldn't normally problem solve by themselves because like if they're off in a car somewhere with Carol and I'm chasing in a van and something comes up, right? Like they need to kind of figure it out and in a way produce, themselves. So really blessed to have them. And then we had I mean, there's so many people to shout out, but I had a really amazing co-producer with me, Karen Gaitán, who's someone she and I we worked together on Science Fair the series. And she's, just also like I don't ever want to do another project without her because she's just so talented. And we got really lucky too in that I mean, there's so many more people. All the folks at This Machine, they were super supportive and always there to deal with sort of the big problems and the small problems. Christina's vision, kind of led the way the entire time. We had another co-producer, Mariam Perez, who like really, brought some continuity because she had actually filmed with Carol before we started filming in Puerto Rico. And so there was a lot of sort of stuff that she brought into the project, but also just a special, touch like later on in the project when she came in, right? With the relationship with Carol and like, um, yeah, I mean, just like, some of these moments in Colombia, like, she did an amazing job there. But yeah, I mean, like, we had the good fortune of also having, so like, when Carol, I think when her team sort of envisioned doing this, they brought someone on to kind of help be sort of a liaison between her team and the documentary film team. And it's well, she's a co-producer on the project. Originally, like I don't think that was meant to be her role, but her name is Sofia Venegas, and she was like really a godsend because you know, there's just so much happening, right? Like there's the stuff that we need to get, but then there's also the tour that's like really, for Carol and her team, that's the most important thing is like showing up every night, giving the best performance. And we're wanting to capture that, but yeah, like you don't want to be in the way, but it is another thing to coordinate, right? And something that they'd never done before, right? They never had a documentary crew chasing them around and following them. And so Sophia really was she was so great in helping us kind of integrate and sort of, be a part of the team, but not be seen. Just letting us know where to be, when to be, when things, when we did get in the way, she was like, because, it's never perfect. We do get in the way sometimes. She was really great about sort of, figuring out ways for us to like, just not be in the way, right? And sort of problem
In a
solve,
nice
right?
way.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so there's just so many people, and I mean, and this is like the tip of the iceberg. Like when you think about all those great concert moments. I mean, we filmed some of that, but there's a whole crew and team of people that's just dedicated to that. And those folks have like a really hard job because they're shouldering cameras for 2.5 hours straight, and they're making it look fantastic. And that team, they were amazing to work alongside with. And the sound folks, I mean, you kind of I wish we had a theater run because and I don't normally wish this, but like there's the experience of watching it at home, like on Netflix, which is good, but we were lucky to screen it in Medellin and also in New York, and the sound is so incredible. I mean, there's just like it feels like you're there, and I mean, I went to like so many of these shows, right? So like the sound mixers like did such a great job of really making the experience feel immersive because it feels like you're at these concerts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's the that's the hard thing and the tricky thing about these kinds of projects that I learned. I mean, normally you do have to consider a lot of these elements when you're making any other kind of documentary, right? But there's such a it's like a whole other level when you're working with a musician, and a musician of Carol's caliber and scale, because you do want to be sure that the experience that you felt when you were there in the concert translates to, to the documentary. And it's not a one for one. It's not like, you just sort of like take the sound from the stadium and like throw it into the edit and it's perfect, right? There's work that has to be done, like, because we're also kind of cutting and editing in a way that may not be, we're trying to tell a story, right? We want it to be true to the concert, but where we make our cuts for the storytelling doesn't necessarily always line up with where, like, things happen in the show, right? And so to make it feel seamless and fluid, there's a lot of attention to detail there, a lot of hard work that has to happen to make sure that the fidelity of the sound is true, the fidelity of the experience, right? That, when we make those decisions and those edits, that you don't lose anything in the experience, and that when someone watches it, it feels like they were there. So many people to thank in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I think those parts are some of my favorite, those musical moments, that like really connect, or it's not just sort of like music for music's sake. Like, it connects with the narrative, like it sort of like tells a story. And we had a really great producer in the story, Alex Simmons, who, like, that was his thing. He came in, he was like, she's a musician and she's loved for her music, and we really need to honor that, and we need to make sure that we integrate that, those moments in a way that is moving story forward, and it feels organic and it's sort of telling story. And I think it was sort of really necessary, and I think an important sort of contribution, like sort of making the experience kind of feel cohesive. So yeah, I mean, I always say that, like, kind of, it's truly like my job is just to make sure that like things were in place and that fires are put out, and that if you saw me, something was wrong, or was going wrong, or
Yeah.
about to go wrong. And so, like, I really tried not to be seen, and luckily there weren't too many moments that I had to show up and really have my presence felt.
Yeah. Well, it's a great experience for you, to just do something totally different than you've ever done, and you can put that in your basket now. And you know, I guess, an important question is, how do you really see this documentary really fitting into the cultural or social landscape that's going on right now in our
Mhm.
United States and globally?
Yeah. Um, when we started making it, I mean, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the elections had happened. So,
Mhm.
we didn't necessarily go into it with that in mind. Um, but like I mentioned, Christina and we covered immigration for a long time, through many administrations, right? At Univision, Christina was an immigration reporter prior to that. I was a immigration reporter after that. I covered um, I covered Trump one, his first term, and a lot of his policies at the border, and his lot of immigration policies. So, this is something that, like, for both Christina and I, and actually many members of the team, like some of the cinematographers actually had covered these stories. This is something that's like, um, part of our expertise. So it's not that like we hadn't considered it at all, but we didn't really go into this project thinking, oh, you know, Carol would kind of find herself, or the story would find itself in a moment, right? And it doesn't really ever go too deep into that. I do think that, like, for us, once the elections did come to pass, there was a self-awareness, right? Um, but it's a fine line, because I know, like, people have a lot of different sort of feelings about this, but I personally don't think that, like, musicians or artists, or, I don't think that they are obligated to sort of, make political statements. If they choose to, right? Like, great. I mean, they're using their platform in a way that I think, gives voice or sheds a light or kind of like focuses on things that need to be focused on. And that's great. But I don't think that that's sort of like, I think a lot of people now look to these sort of, icons, right, for that kind of input. But I don't think that they need to, their role is to make music, or their role is to make art, or to make films, or like it shouldn't it's not a prerequisite. But I think, for Carol, there's a recognition. She understands. I mean, she is, a Latina woman. She is traveling the world. She sees how people perceive her and perceive people like her, right? And so, yeah, there is a moment or two where she calls attention to it, but I think it's in the most like sort of authentic way, which is that, um, part of what um, part of what like I think she sees her role is as a musician from Colombia is to make sure that when she's going out into the world, she's representing her city, her country, her community, uh, in the best possible way, right? And I think that like it makes and I think that's very much how I think of my work. That's very much how I think a lot of the people on the team, the production team, think of their work. And so yeah, it makes any of us sad when like, because we're working really hard, and we know a lot of people in our lives that are working really hard, not to be famous or to make money, but because they're passionate about what they do, and and they're honest about what they do. And so it makes us really sad when there is a narrative out there, and it's coming from the highest places of power, that we're anything but hardworking, dedicated, passionate people, right? Um, like anyone, right? Like it's not like, there's like Latinos don't have that market cornered, right? I think anyone who comes to this country looking for a better opportunity, that's what they're bringing. That's the energy they're bringing. They're really looking for a better life, for themselves, for their children, for their families. And so, yeah, when there is a really dominant narrative coming from the highest halls of power, that is like farther from the truth, right? It makes us sad, and I think it also makes us sort of angry, and it makes us want to prove to the world that like that's not who we are. And so, while this project doesn't sort of overtly, fit into sort of some of my other work that I've done that kind of more squarely challenges these I would say false narratives, right? I think that it is part of creating space, right? Um, Showing that, you know, you can do these kinds of stories, and they can be interesting, they can be entertaining, they can be successful. And and the hope is that, by making this project and having a platform in a place like Netflix, which by the way from the beginning was like hugely supportive of the project, um, and have it, it debuted. I mean, I was surprised, maybe I shouldn't have been, but when it came out that first week, it was number one in 19 countries and in the top 10 in 27 countries. It's the first time a Spanish language documentary, I think, it's my understanding, it's the first time a Spanish language documentary has done anything like that. And it stayed on in the top 10, for several weeks after. Um, these conventions that like, you can't have projects with subtitles, or you can't do, projects that are all in Spanish, can't, have mass appeal. Well, we disproved that, right? And so the hope is that, when someone else in the community, like, and maybe not even just in Latinx community, maybe someone who wants to do a film in all Italian, or a film in, another language, right? Um, Comes along and says, "Hey, I have this great story, but just so happens that most of the main characters are speaking it in another language." Well, hopefully, like this project sort of proves that, like, with some good storytelling and a lot of hard work, right? Like it can be done and it can be successful. Um, that's the hope. So, a lot of the projects that I do, I think, are always sort of moving toward that goal of expanding the spaces and places where certain kinds of narratives are able to be told, or just challenging sort of the conventions of like, what kinds of projects should be given platform or given resources. Um, and this is a big one, right? This is sort of like this project was a big project, but there are many other projects that I'm working on that, that's the kind of space that I'm coming from, is sort of like, trying to challenge the paradigms, the boxes that they put us in, right? Or to sort of resurface, or shed new light on histories that like have been intentionally obscured or disappeared, right? To sort of, like the hope is that like, if you do enough of this work, then eventually we'll get to a place where, all voices can be included, right? I'm coming at it from, my community and what I know. But I think there are a lot of communities that like don't get the space in place or get put in boxes. And that's what I always challenge. And I think in a way that's what we did here. I mean, you see it in the film. I mean, quite literally, like it's what I think Carol faces kind of almost daily in, in the work that she does. So in that way, there was a really nice sort of understanding. I think like we understood what, at some level what she was up against, and she understood at some level what we were trying to do and what we were up against. And together we kind of built this little project into a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, as far as, I always ask about the greatest gift that you received from this particular project. What would you say that is for you personally?
Oh wow. I didn't consider this. I mean, it's tough to answer because um, there's just so many things to be grateful for on this project. I got to work with people that I really love. I mean, they're colleagues, but they're also family. And not just Christina and Luisa and Meki, but a lot of and like a lot of the people that I work alongside with. I've worked with before, or have admired their work before. And even though for some of the folks it might be the first time that we were working together, I always kind of think of us as like, they're filmmakers in the community, and I see them as kindred spirits. And I've always thought that like even though we weren't working together, like we were, right, we were sort of trying to achieve the same mission. And then we got the opportunity to work together, and it turns out actually the intuition was right. And now we have this experience. So I'm really grateful for that. Right, I'm grateful for having the opportunity to continue to work with people that I respect and love, and to meet people who I've respected and loved from afar, and work alongside them. That was really special. um, I'm always amazed. I mean, this, but like there aren't, to my knowledge, any journalists in the family, right? There aren't any, filmmakers in the family. Although Theo is, he has sort of like, he's sort of like filmmaking adjacent.
Mhm.
um but I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. And when I started, I didn't know how far I would go. I didn't, um yeah, I just had no clue like where I would end up. And so whenever I get another opportunity, I'm always like uh, shocked and grateful, right? Um, just, and then I'm just like, well, great. I guess I'm still doing this. Like I guess here's another chance to challenge myself, and to um, and to try to get better. Like try to make improvements on the craft and the skills. And so I'm always grateful when I get a new one, right? When someone else comes along and says, "Hey, I have this thing. Do you want to come along for the ride?" I'm always really grateful for that. Um, but I guess, this one was really different for me because I had a a baby in the middle of it. My son was born in the middle of the project. And yeah, I mean, there's so much immediately that he's taught me. Um, I had no idea when I imagined into sort of being a parent. I had no idea like what it's not what I imagined is not what it actually is like. Um, I mean, there's things about it that I had imagined that are true, but there's so much more to it, I guess is what I'm saying, right? And so, kind of in the context of this, I had a lot of anxiety about like not um when I was a parent, I would maybe not be able to do the work
Mm.
at the same capacity, with the same rigor, intensity. And, I think I learned that that's not necessarily, that was the wrong way to think about it, right? That, you know, I still do my work with the same kind of sort of, but attention to detail and intensity and passion and rigor. But it's just sort of, it's different. Like you now have like you just have more, right, in your life. Um you have more to consider, more to love. And so that was a lesson I learned in this project. Just sort of like learning to, yeah, learning to sort of like fit everything right into a day. Learning to also like it also was like the beginning with him wasn't the easiest, right? And then there were some other challenges that we faced. And in the past, maybe I would, when there was sort of like these things, personal things that you had to take care of, right? And a lot of work, right? Maybe I would have just sort of like killed myself to figure it out. And I learned that like actually, the people around you, the love that I have for them, they also have that love for me, which I don't know why I'd never considered, but yeah, I learned that you can actually just sort of like sometimes say, "Hey, I'm going through something tough right now," and the people around you will have that same grace and support and care for you that you have for them. And so, kind of going back to the thing I said originally about working with people that I love and respect. I mean, I really learned I learned why that's important, right? Because they were there happy for me when Ariel was born. They were there supportive when things got tough, right? They really looked out through, those first couple months, and when things got challenging. And so, um, that's something that like I don't think I would have learned without Ariel, like without him being born. But I'm really, really grateful for it and feel blessed, really. Yeah. And I mean there's so many more lessons that were learned on this one.
And more to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just that your life just becomes even more full and more
Yeah.
full in the best possible way, even with the challenges. Having a child, it's like no other thing in your life you will ever experience. It's just amazing. And it gets better and better and better as time goes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because like when you're about to have a kid, people will just offer advice. Um and it's appreciated, but like you just don't know, like it's so specific, like it's you and your partner and this new thing. And I mean there are yeah, it's like it really in the beginning felt like an alien, that you love deeply, but just like it's just like yeah, they just sort of hand it thing and they're like good luck, um and but it is so specific, it's like there are commonalities, like I think an experience, like because the act of raising a child, I think like there are things that if you do it, like you connect with other people who've done it, but no one person or no combination of people is the same, right? And to me, that's been the greatest gift. And yeah, I mean, he's just like immediately he like taught me things about myself that I would have never known had he not showed up, Um, and and then that's a daily thing, like every day, he's teaching me new things about myself, that things that like I don't always like, but I'm glad that he's surfacing them because it's like, okay, well, that's something that I didn't know was there, but now I need to sort of work on and think through. And then there's things that, I didn't know I was capable of that I do like. Um, and he's teaching me that about myself too. And I also think that like when it was really, because he was colicky, and in
Yeah.
those early days, you know, when I mean colicky babies, my parents tell me about how I was when they first had me, and I am so sorry. I mean, you have no control over it, but it's just like now you understand what it means. And it's tough because there's nothing, the baby's trying to communicate, but there's nothing, it can do, right? There's not, I mean, we don't really know what colic is. So it's like you try all these like
Yeah.
things and like none of them work, so you're just sort of like having to go through it together. But in those early days when it was really difficult, the thing the thing that really kind of like, I mean, there's so much joy, even though it was hard, there was so much joy. And I think one of those joys was just seeing, how Karen just seeing this new dimension of Karen, and um seeing how she was growing and like just yeah, I mean, she was just so phenomenal. Also, you know, her like yeah, she's an amazing like women are amazing. Like seeing like um my child be born was just like so special and incredible, and just made me have a whole new depth of love and respect for her. But yeah, that was really beautiful too. It's like being able to see her and like and all that she did selflessly, and does selflessly, for Ariad. It's beautiful. And so that experience was I mean, it's all happening while this project is
Yeah.
is going
Yeah.
on, but it was so special. I mean, this project, it will always, I'll always remember it because like in the middle of it, we my family went through this, and it was such a blessing, and it's so much fun, and it's still so much fun. So yeah, I mean, a lot of growth in the last couple of years as we built this documentary, at least for
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as anything new on the horizon that you want to share that you're going to be focusing on and doing projects?
Yeah, I mean, so right now I've got a lot of things percolating, and they're all equally as important. But I think the thing that I'm like um most excited, or maybe I should say that like is most personal to me, is I've been for a long time I've been thinking about ways to sort of tell a story about the community I came from, the community that Theo Mel and mom and dad came from, East Harlem, and like at a very specific time period, looking at like the 60s and 70s, and just sort of like how that's like an inflection point for um at least Puerto Rican culture in the diaspora. But I think that if you look at like sort of a lot of the things that like were being wrestled with and contended with in that time period, I think it's also an inflection point for other diasporic, Latin American communities, right? Um, and so what I'm working on now with a really great filmmaker and another collaborator in this sort of community, Carla Gutierrez, who she's the director of the documentary on Frida Kahlo that came out a
Hmm.
few years ago. So we've been working together on trying to figure out what that story, for a few years, figure out who are the people who are going to tell the story. And so right now, we're really trying to, it's hard because this is a very different project. And I think in this political moment, a difficult project to sort of get off the ground. But I think we're getting there. We're telling a story about the Young Lords, which is they were a group of young Puerto Ricans who were sort of politically awakened. And when this awakening happens, they really started to not just feel the sort of discrimination and feel the oppression that they were experiencing and their community was experiencing, but they start to put sort of words to it in a way that really struck a chord with the Puerto Rican community, the Black community, other Latinos in the community at that time in the late 60s and 70s. And for a very brief but intense moment, they mobilized. They were able to get people out into the streets and really address some of the biggest problems that East Harlem and other sort of diasporic Puerto Ricans and Black communities were facing. And so that's kind of the story that we're looking at. And I think it's exciting because I think, the more we dig into it, you realize that what they started, back then in the late 60s and 70s is it's still going on today, right? Like their legacy isn't sort of like, when we say legacy, we think of it as something that like something nice that you inherit as a story that happened a long time ago. And what's great about learning this story more deeply is that I realized that no, this is very alive and active, right? Like the things that they did, I inherited and I benefited from, right? The things that they, articulated, like we've been building on that to sort of challenge these different shapes and forms of the same problem, right? For many decades, since they brought awareness to this. And so yeah, I mean, that's one of the projects that we're working on actively right now, and I'm really excited about. We've been in touch with some of the former founding members, and we're looking to sort of branch out. And because, we started sort of looking at the New York chapter, but they had many different chapters, and they were founded actually in Chicago they were a gang that then became politically activated and moved into sort of a political action organization. They had chapters in Philadelphia and Connecticut and Boston. And so, we're really trying to sort of, the story is rooted in New York because that's where I think a lot of the boldest actions happen. But we're really trying to shed light on how it isn't just about Puerto Ricans in East Harlem. It's about a lot of these social issues that a lot of people were facing back then, and I think we're still facing today. So yeah, that's one on, just sort of it's top of mind because like we've been doing a lot of work around it. And it is very close and personal. These are things that like my family faced. And so I'm excited for that project. But there's a lot going on. I mean, I'm working right now at Masterclass. You may know them they're the folks who do like, Chef Ramsay teaches you how to make some really
Yeah.
amazing dishes. Yeah, yeah. So I'm working alongside them on a couple of projects that I can't really talk about right now, but they're exciting and they're fun. Yeah, just keeping busy and still just sort of like uh, just shocked that like you finish a thing and you feel like, oh no, what am I going to do next? And then
Yeah.
something materializes and you're like, great, I guess I'm still doing this.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's a tough industry. It's a tough business.
Yeah. And I remember on the last interview, yeah, you talked a lot about that. And
I mean, I was like, I think like legit. Trying to remember where I was, but it was very uncertain. Like I think I was winding something down and there was nothing really coming up.
but I think I
Yeah,
remember you sharing that you were looking for something that had more personal meaning to you
yeah,
in your work. And, you know, you're creating that one step at
yeah,
a time, right? One project at a time. And, you know, I just feel like, things are just gonna keep moving for you because it has to, because the more you do and your intention, is very pure. And not to say that there's not other factors that come in that are reality and so forth that you shared, but I think that you're on this certain path and you attract those people, right? And you already have a group of people that are in the same mindset, with the same intentions. So that's, you have a community. So,
yeah,
and that's always
yeah.
so important.
No, it's true. I mean, I said earlier that like these projects don't like one person doesn't do them, but I also think in a career, um, it may look like I made these opportunities for myself. And like, yeah, some of that's true, but it really, the same people that I collaborate on across these different projects are the same people who, they pass opportunities to you or they look out for you. Um, it's like you find your tribe, and I'm really lucky, that I've been able to find those people. Because yeah, I mean, it's the success is not, I guess I'm not I don't get all the credit for it. It's like, yeah, I figure out like when an opportunity shows up, like you go for it, and then you may not be fully ready for it, but you figure out how to do it. So I have that initiative, but a lot of sort of the best things in my career, they came about because, yeah, people in my community, they looked out, right? Or they thought I might be a good fit, or they thought I might have something to contribute or say to it. So the success is shared, like, and I pay it forward too, like I think that's the other important thing. It's like, you know, I'm very blessed, but I also, I make sure that like, I always give back. Not because only because like I think it's this shared vision of like, if we are all gonna get to sort of where in my mind I hope we get one day, right? I can't do it alone, right? So I need to make sure that I'm supporting and building up and looking out for other folks too. And that we're all, not just sort of like giving them work opportunities, but also just being like, you know, hey, are you good? Like, do you need
Yeah,
anything? Like just
yeah,
checking up on folks. And yeah, because that's really where it matters, I think. Like not not when you have an opportunity or something good to give, but also when people need help, right? Like just being there and just sort of making sure that, that they're taking care of themselves, because it's a long sort of project, right? It's not just right now. It's about where we're going and what we hope it will leave, in my case, for my child, right? Um,
mm,
but what we'll leave behind for, I think, other people, like us, for them to build on top of. So,
yeah,
um, very grateful for all that.
yeah. Well, thank you, Kristofer. I'm grateful for you.
No, thank you. It's always such a pleasure. And I miss you. I wish things weren't so busy, but we'll make time.
No, we will. We will. And everyone go out and see the film on Netflix. I think you'll really, really enjoy it. I've been telling a lot of people, especially in my family. I think that they'll love it. It kind of reminded me a little bit of my niece, Dana.
Yeah,
With her progression in her career and her commitment. But anyway, thank you so much, Kristofer. I love you and
love you too.
hope to see you soon.
Yeah,
Say hi to everyone.
I will. If Idiot wasn't asleep, I'd bring him so you can see him. But we'll get together this summer.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
take care. Thank you,
Love you,
Christopher.
Titi.
Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to another episode of It's Messy, but It's So Good. And I want to thank my guest, Kristofer Rios, filmmaker, for sharing his experience with his new documentary that he produced called Karol G, Tomorrow Was Beautiful, for Netflix. You can actually see this film on Netflix currently. It is very successful. It came in as #1 in 19 countries and top 10 in 27 countries. Kristofer shared a lot about the whole process of filmmaking and his intention with his team to challenge the industry norms and elevate Latinx stories on a global platform. And this film highlights the challenges Karol G has faced as a woman in the reggaeton industry and her drive to expand opportunities for Spanish language content. I really enjoyed watching this film. It's very vulnerable and raw, and it really gives you the reality of what it takes, the commitment and the energy and the intention and the passion to produce a tour, an amazing tour, and to really grow in the industry with all the challenges that Karol G faces. You'll really enjoy this film. Again, you can check it out on Netflix. And also, we talked about some other things. We talked about Kristofer welcoming a child during production with his wife, Karen, and the support of his team and his family. And he's continuing to advocate for diverse, inclusive storytelling by his new project, which is an upcoming documentary on the Young Lords with filmmaker Karol G. So you can check out Kristofer's information, his Instagram, his website, and his IMDb in the show notes. And again, Kristofer, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us, and also to the audience for listening in and tuning in. I just wanted to remind you that you can follow the show and share this episode with anyone that you think might enjoy and benefit from listening. And also, I have a free gift if you go to my website, franmedinacoaching.com, or certainly to the show notes. You can download the free gift, and that will get you to subscribe to my email list, where you'll find out about anything new coming down the pike, including podcasts. So thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next time.